Adam Kramer, welcome back to Tuscaloosa, Alabama, man. I hope you're having a great day.
Hey, buddy. Always good to talk to you, man.
Hey, no doubt. And we haven't caught up since September. I'd love to get your thoughts about what you see in this Alabama football team.
Well, it's kind of funny. I mean, it's gone through different waves, and, by no means do I want to label this as like a gritty Alabama football team, but it does feel mortal. And again, we're grading on a much different curve than we are with everybody else. So when you're the number one team in the country and you're unbeaten and you've looked every bit the part of a favorite heading into, one of the final weeks of the season here, I mean, that speaks to the standards that Alabama has set. But just in general, like a few things that have jumped out, I really am impressed with the growth of Jalen Hurts. The end of that Mississippi State game to me was significant. Calvin Ridley, in terms of not necessarily his growth, because I think he's been this kind of player, the way they're using him, and also his yards after catch, it just is extraordinary. And then defensively, I think Minka is every bit the face of a program and probably the future face of an NFL team. And I know he's got a long way to grow, but man, Dylan Moses, and I know it's Mercer, I know, there have been some struggles, but in terms of just pure athletes, man, he may be the best one that Alabama's had in a long time. And that says something when you think of the long list of people, just the ridiculous athletic talent that have come through there. This kid is just something. So there's so many different takeaways, as there always is with Alabama. But overall, yeah, they're in the position that they're in because the way they've recruited, the way that they developed, and even through injuries, they've prevailed. I think it speaks volumes.
Adam, when you're talking about that, going through these injuries, because I was looking at the national award list a couple of minutes ago, and you've got Mika scattered out a couple of different awards, and you've got J.K. Scott, the punter, but there's not been this one go-to guy for Alabama on that defensive side of the football. You know what I mean? Like consistently the alpha dog that we're accustomed to seeing with Alabama.
No, there's not. I mean, and there were some gaping holes left when you look at Jonathan Allen and Foster. I mean, these were like larger-than-life players. Forget about just the talent itself in terms of presence. And I think that's what makes this even more impressive, to lose, 8 of the top 90 draft picks in the draft, and to be gutted specifically in the, at linebacker, the way they've been gutted, and not just linebacker, but the defense as a whole, to break in some new offensive players. I mean, you could go down the list. It to me is why I don't get sick of this team. I don't, there's a perception that maybe people are tired of the coverage. Like, each year is so different. This year's been very different. It's felt like they've had to kind of patchwork this together, and they have pretty brilliantly up until this point. I think the question now, of course, is kind of turning it forward is, this is a team that, with Auburn, you talk about the lack of presence on these awards. I mean, this is a team that, on paper and from what we saw against Georgia, could expose some of their weaknesses, and we're going to have to wait and see. But until this point, what you mentioned, it is different. You don't have these fixtures that you've been accustomed to seeing, and yet they're still getting it done.
Which is, one of the reasons I was looking last night and I was voting, and I'd wrote down, when you look at Nick Saban, the job that he's been able to do to keep this defense still consistently one of the best with all these injuries. It often gets overlooked when a great coach does great things. Nick Saban has done great things with this defense to get them to play at this caliber, even though they haven't been able to maintain these injuries or health-wise.
Yeah, not only that, I mean, it was a team that relied so much on sacks last year, and this year it's been a little bit of a different makeup there. I think in terms of, I think the defensive backfield has played exceptionally well in that regard. Again, this is not perfect. Like, this is not the way you'd have it when you throw on the Mississippi State game and you're seeing them have running space and you're seeing that defensive line get pushed back and guys getting, missing tackles. It's different. You're not used to seeing it because, normally that's the sort of, that's Alabama's way. No matter what they go through, that's sort of what they do. I'm completely with you. We are kind of numb to the success of this team, regardless of what happens in the Iron Bowl, because it's a game that they could certainly lose. I mean, I'm not going out on some, limb saying that. Auburn has played really well and seems to have a pretty good formula for how you can expose some of those weaknesses. But year and in line to make another playoff, man. That it is a testament to him, and hopefully at least the majority of the people don't just simply sit back and take that for granted.
We're talking to Adam Kramer, BleacherReport.com, national college football analyst. Does Alabama need to take a different approach into this Auburn game and be a little bit more aggressive to try to come out and deliver some points to maybe give this defense a little bit more, I guess, security blanket to get going into this game?
I think the beauty in some of the big plays they've had is these aren't necessarily, you don't have to throw the ball deep to generate the big play. It kind of goes back to what Ridley's been able to do after the catch. Now, in terms of maybe putting a little bit more on Jalen Hurts, throwing the ball early on, I would say absolutely. But again, that doesn't necessarily mean you have to throw the ball 40 yards down the field. You can still go for it without necessarily having to heave the ball up and maybe flip the game one way or another. That being said, I mean, really, you don't necessarily need to shake who you are. I don't get a sense that Auburn's going to come out and just throw the ball 15, 16 times here in the first few drives. You can still, I think, knowing Alabama the way we do, they're probably still going to try and control the tempo of the game. They still have a great offensive line that they think they can wear down Auburn's defense, and if they get it going, and I think that's one of the things this year when you've seen Alabama run the football a little bit more consistently, and they get Harris going, you get Bo going. I think that's the rhythm you'd want to find, and then you sprinkle in some of the big plays. So, yeah, I think you feel how the game is going, and ultimately I think it'll be dictated pretty early. I don't necessarily think you need to change too much, and I think you can get those big plays without having to push the envelope.
Adam, as we look at this Alabama game, if I put you on the spot on a Monday evening, which way would you lean, and who's going to win this game?
I picked Alabama. We got to put all of our picks in this week early, man, because of
same with us. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I'm picking Alabama. Point spread I saw this morning was 4. I'm not sure if that's done any movement. I haven't seen any stuff since.
It's a little. It's up to 4.5, almost across the board. So Vegas is driving this number up.
Now that's interesting because I would have expected maybe movement the other way, considering the way this conversation has gone. I think that's actually a pretty good sign for Bama, albeit a very early sign. A lot of time here, even though it does feel like it's going to be a short week. So I lean Bama, and I hate to say this because we've seen them lose. You and I have seen them lose together in person to a certain type of formula where they just, you run 100 plays on them. I need to see someone do it. And Auburn, if they can duplicate that Georgia game plan, they're going to win. They're going to win. That was a brilliant game. They played exceptionally well. I think oftentimes, however, we can overreact a bit. And what I mean by that is, and that's not taking anything away from Auburn, who's been exceptional, again, especially in certain significant moments. But when games turn sideways like that, you start to think that maybe the gap between two teams is larger than it is. I think this game is pretty evenly matched. I think Jalen Hurts is going to play a really good game. I think that's the difference in games like this, and whatever games may be for Alabama moving forward, if they can play on, is he will no longer just be a guy like he was in the playoffs where he looked really, kind of a fish out of water. I think it's different this year. I think they can have some explosiveness in the offense. I think they'll deliver enough of that. And also, I think you'll see the front seven. You mentioned front seven play better. You mentioned Saban's ability to adjust. Mississippi State, kudos to them, had a good game plan and probably could have, and some would argue should have won that game. I think you'll see the linebackers get a little bit more push. We'll see how much healthier they're getting. I know there's some questions about that. I think there's a lot out there that says Alabama's run defense will be better than it's been.
Adam, let me also ask you the conversation from your perspective. If Alabama slips up and they get beat down in Lee County, are they out of this thing in your opinion?
No, not at all. I mean, we got to see what happens, but we've yet to have real chaos in this playoff discussion. I mean, we really haven't. So here's a perfect example, right? Like, let's say they lose, just for the sake of it. Look at all there's going to be carnage no matter what. Clemson and Miami are going to play each other. Ohio State's going to play Wisconsin as a decent favorite. If you're starting to stack up Alabama with Auburn, Alabama with Wisconsin and Ohio State And USC, Alabama's going to win a lot of those beauty pageants, not because their schedule has been great, but because Alabama's Alabama. Clemson, Miami, somebody's going to lose. Okay, so Georgia could still lose. There's a lot here to be decided, but when you actually look at the teams that are in the mix, even with the loss, Alabama will be firmly in the mix. I can tell you this, too. If they get into the playoff with one loss and not a conference champion, how mad are people going to get? You know the pulse of national people, right? And I don't care. You know me, I think it is what it is. But how mad will people get? I'm one for outrage, and the outrage will flow violently if that happens.
But Adam, the way that they're going to handle this in that selection committee, because now they've got a lot of former coaches now in that room, what they're going to ask themselves, who do you not want to play? That's the way they're going to look at it. And that's why I've tried to talk about Ohio State. That's why I think they're getting so much love in that room, is because the amount of talent that's in Columbus, Ohio.
I think when you start to stack the potential resumes side by side, let's assume Alabama doesn't get blown out this weekend, which we don't know. I think Ohio State, if Wisconsin wins out, I think that makes life a little bit more difficult for Alabama. Let's pencil Oklahoma in. Okay, even with Baker Mayfield suspended for probably a series, and who knows? Hey, they could still lose, and if they do, that's trouble. But they feel like the likeliest team to get it. You're going to have somebody from the ACC most likely, get in. You're going to have someone from the SEC most likely get in. Wisconsin gets in. I think that's trouble, but they'll be, I think, a decent underdog in the Big Ten championship game, no matter what happens here in the next few weeks. So when you look at Alabama's resume, they're going to earn the benefit of the doubt from the committee because of who they are and what they've done. That's the human element to this. I think the human element is going to help them immensely. I also think the other thing, people were ripping on Alabama's schedule throughout much of the year. That resume has gotten a lot cleaner and better here over the last 4 to 5 weeks. Has it not? I think that's going to help them quite a bit as well.
Adam, let me ask you, when you look at Oklahoma and TCU, can TCU throw up a roadblock in front of Oklahoma in that Big 12 championship?
I think TCU is good enough. The issue is we just saw them match up, and Mayfield just kind of carved them up. It's a really good defense. They're a pretty good team. I think it's a legitimate test to them, assuming TCU, can handle their business this week, and I think they will. I think they're 23-point favorite last time I checked. So I think it's possible. The problem is, I say that, and I watched the whole game a few weeks ago, and TCU was basically ran off the field, but we know how the sport is, right? And we know how it can be different. We know how the environment will change based on where the game is played. Yeah, absolutely. I really like the TCU team, and while the defense did not play well against Baker Mayfield, and I think Oklahoma would be a pretty sizable chalk, and deservingly so, that's by no means impossible. You look at what's left on the table for a lot of these teams. I think Clemson against South Carolina this week's a really interesting game. I think that's a game that I hope Clemson's not overlooking, because I think that's one where you got to look out for. They're thinking about Miami and all the things left. There's a lot of potential weirdness still out there. And for a playoff system that has not produced basically any of it, we've gotten to this week of each of the last few years, and things have basically, gone to form. And as a result, we've had very little playoff drama. I would be shocked if that's the case again. I think things are definitely due to get weird here.
But hey, you know what this is when we talk about the Iron Bowl rivalry? I got a text message a while ago. It said, yeah, but if Alabama loses, do they not now have to pull for Auburn to win the SEC title? And I said, yes. Yes. and an Alabama guy said, no, thank you. I would never pull. You got to understand this thing in Tuscaloosa, man. They hate each other.
See, that's great. See, that's why this sport is great, though, right? You're pulling for your own cause, but you would absolutely, that could be the difference in getting in and getting not. And not, you know what I mean? So in the end, this decision is going to come down to a group of human beings, and brand does matter. Who you are matters. Who you beat matters. How you lose matters. All of that matters. A lot of that now. Ohio State, Iowa dropped 55 points on them. That's going to hurt, man. I think a lot of these losses, a lot of things that happen, assuming Alabama's competitive this week, and I say that kind of snickering because I just assume they will be, I think they're still in a pretty decent position.
Adam Kramer, I appreciate you, man. I hope you have a great Thanksgiving. I'm glad we were able to catch up and talk a little football. I'm sure that if Alabama is able to make that run, we'll certainly get you back on in the coming weeks and get you to break it down again. Adam, I appreciate it, man. Have a great Thanksgiving holiday.
Thank you, buddy. You as well.